Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. I am once again back talking about the latest edition of Warcry, but today we're talking about something brand spanking new. Today we are talking about the Gorger Mawpack. But before we get into the Gorger Mawpack, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, as it helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon and helps me get my content out to more budding Warcry players. But without further ado, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
So who are the Gorger Mawpack? The Gorger Mawpack are comprised entirely of ogres who have been cursed to feel eternal hunger. They eat non-stop, but despite that, they have no defining ogre gut to speak of. Their lithe frames make them far faster than their grotesque size would imply, and their gangly arms contain an unnatural strength capable of rending armor, flesh, and bone. Gorger Mawpacks, mechanically, are quite possibly the best bespoke warband Warcry has ever seen, and I am beyond stoked to sing their praises and highlight their weaknesses. Let's dive into some pros and some cons. The Mawpack is 5 big models in one box, and they are huge both in terms of physical model size and in stats. We're talking 30 wounds minimum, 3 damage minimum per attack, movement 5 at a bare minimum. These guys can take quite the beating, and they can dish it out equal measure, and they can get to where you want them to be. You know what's not big though? Their points cost. Despite their power, the Mawpack are reasonably priced per model, which makes them all the more enticing to play. Their biggest strength though, in my opinion, is their outstanding threat projection. The concept is pretty easy to grasp. How much of the board can your model cover and then still threaten? This typically means ranged attacks or your move plus attack range. Threat projection lets you control space, and the Mawpack have some of the best projection in the entire game because they get bonus move actions on doubles. More on that in a little bit. Now, the Mawpack are so ferocious that they can oftentimes just ignore the mission and they will still do alright. You have a low model count, but if you kill enough of the enemy, then suddenly that model count stops mattering. Smart play is still required, but your goal is to mostly just punch things in the head. And because of this, the Mawpack have a super easy to understand and straightforward game plan that is just downright fun to mess around with. Bad play will still get you clapped across the cheeks, but the power of your models and their focus on murder and speed makes them a dream to pilot for people of all skill levels. Now, of course, they do have weaknesses, and by far their biggest downside in terms of their stat lines has to be their toughness of 3, which absolutely sucks. This is the highest and only toughness they have access to in faction, and it's nasty. This means your Gorgers, whilst very bulky in terms of wounds, bleed those wounds incredibly fast. The average strength in Warcry is 4. So most models are hitting you on a 3+, which is not great. Even chaff are poking you down on a 4+. You always have to be aware of this flaw, and effectively managing it is your key to success. Then of course you have the woes of being an elite warband. Elite warbands need to kill to stay relevant in objective-based missions. They simply cannot compete otherwise. What does this mean? Well, it means your warband is beholden somewhat to the dice gods, way more than a non-elite warband. You rely on those dice to deliver damage, and if you don't do that damage, you basically just lose. Not only that, your opponent will nearly always have activation advantage, meaning you have to think 15 steps ahead as to not barrel into a trap once you've run out of activations. And this really goes into their next weakness, which is the potential to be too aggressive. The Mawpack are incredibly powerful in close combat, but your models can die. And when they start to die, you really feel it. Being too aggressive and charging headfirst into a clump of enemies will get you killed. You always need to be aware of your limitations of your models and the potential of your opponents. You want to get into combat, but you also want to survive long enough to get more damage through later on in the game. And finally, this is probably the most obvious weakness the Mawpack have to contend with. 4 out of their 5 models can't pick up treasure tokens without burning ability dice. This makes them very hard to pilot in treasure missions, and you just need to be aware that this subset of mission is an uphill battle no matter what you do. That being said, pro number 3 covers this eventuality. You don't need to play the treasure mission. If your clawback lives, all you have to do is clear a path to the treasure and then kill everyone who dares claim it. If you win a treasure mission, you get infinite bragging rights by default. But that's enough pros and cons. Let's dive into their reaction and abilities, starting with their reaction, Rending Bite. As far as reactions go, defensive ones are some of my favourite, and Rending Bite is one of my all-time favourites among that bunch. When an enemy attacks, if they fail to crit you, you deal 6 damage. This is really nice. That's a huge chunk of damage that is fairly reliable depending on the number of attacks coming in at you. You will never use this on a fully healthy Gorger. What you will do, however, is burn this on a nearly dead Gorger to squeeze as much value out of them before they die. This is your self-destruct button, and it should be used over counter 99% of the time, because frankly, counter absolutely sucks on toughness 3 Gorgers. Now we get to the good stuff. This is one of the best abilities in the game. Like, we're talking top 3 kind of good here. And I am not exaggerating in the slightest. Charge type abilities like Bounding Leap have always been monstrously powerful, but for the most part, the ability has been confined to slow-moving Iron Jaws or less than stellar Bone Splitters. Not anymore. Bounding Leap lets you move your movement characteristic towards an enemy that is within 6 inches of you, as long as you move closer to the closest enemy. Gorgers have a 5-inch movement range and 1 to 2 inch ranges on their attacks. If you are in range of Bounding Leap, your opponent is in range to get hit in the head, and hit hard. This lets you move and double attack fairly easily, but the real threat is to move plus Bounding Leap plus attack. You have a whopping 11 inches of threat range with this to maneuver, and let me tell you, that is a huge amount of space to cover. When you factor in base size and board size, a single Gorger has a threat range that covers more than half the board. You can reach out and touch just about anything at any time, and your opponent can't easily deal with this. Finally, you might think that ranged units will be the bane of Gorgers because they can just shoot you from outside your threat range, and in this scenario, that is just not true. You move and then you charge. That is 15 inches of movement, which means you can get base to base with just about any ranged unit in the game. 9 out of 10 of these targets can't disengage and shoot. Ranged units will live in constant fear of Gorgers, and rightfully so. This is an unbelievable ability. You will spend almost all of your dice on this every turn, and when you don't, you're spending that dice on Onslaught. The more doubles you have with the Mawpack, the better you will be. Now, Glimmer of Consciousness is a double that temporarily turns your beasts into, well, not beasts. This is almost exclusively used in treasure missions. You are going to probably use this as a clutch play in some situations on turn 4, and like that's it. It's a must-have ability for a faction like this, but it is absolutely a bit of a tax to take the warband. This is a tax not on points, but a tax on resources. And the final universally accessible ability is your quad, and it is called Starving Rampage. This is your unique quad, and it is situationally excellent. This lets you take a meaty swing at every enemy within 1 inch. Basically, you run into a cluster of dudes with your best guys, and you attempt to clobber them all to death. Rampage is often better since it is more versatile, but Starving Rampage absolutely has play, especially for clearing dense objectives. Very fun ability that your opponent should be playing around. But with all of this precursory awesome out of the way, let's take a look at the Gorgers themselves. And we start with the Clawback. This is your leader, and they are pretty darn awesome. 4536 is a lovely profile, and the ability to bump their damage to 47 is very nice on a double that can actually outdo Onslaught against anything that's toughness 4 or below. This guy also has 35 wounds, which is a lot to get through, even with only toughness 3. This guy is very solid, a great leader, and one capable of tearing things apart. His biggest strength, however, is the lack of the Beast rune mark. This guy is the only guy who can carry treasure without being forced to burn a double. Very valuable in those rare treasure missions. Now, interestingly enough, the Cave Howler is one of your best fighters, but he is also the one you are likely going to cut. The reason for this is that he's a little bit too expensive for what he brings to the table when compared to just regular Gorgers. Simply put, 220 points is just too high. This guy is close to 50 points more expensive than other Gorgers, and sure, 5436 is amazing for killing chaff. We are talking about battering anything toughness 4 or below to death reliably. Anything higher than that, and that's when things get a little bit cagey and his cracks start to show. Not only that, his unique ability, Agonizing Roar, is also pretty situational and probably straight up bad in most cases. It basically shuts down disengage actions 50% of the time on enemies within 6 inches. What does this mean? Well, it lets your Gorgers force enemies to stay stuck in combat with them. In theory, this means you prevent enemies from being able to move freely. In reality, it encourages people to just punch your soft Gorgers to death because they have nothing better to do, and it's also a triple, and it only works on a 4+. It's kind of terrible. Finally, he's a bit too expensive to use blessings on, as the only real blessing worth taking is +1 strength, and that's 20 points, and he already competes with the next dude. And that is the Gorger with Great Club. This is one of the 3 basic Gorgers, and he is up there as one of the best. He has range 2, which is amazing. He has strength 6, which is amazing. He has 4/8 damage, which is amazing. His downside, he's only got 2 attacks, and that admittedly does suck. What you do here is you add the +1 attack blessing for 30 points. This makes him 215 points, and that is a steal. We are talking Iron Jaws Mega Boss levels of power, but with way more mobility and range 2 and 4 less points. This guy is amazing, especially with Onslaught, and more or less invalidates the more expensive Cave Howler. I wouldn't take more than one of these guys in most cases, since they are still quite expensive, and you'll have to start cutting into your numbers eventually, but one is all you really need. He also has a unique triple, Maddened Blows. This turns your hits of 5+ into crits, and when you crit for 8, that's kind of spicy. I'm not entirely sure on the exact maths here, but my gut tells me that Onslaught is usually better unless you're running up against toughness 7 units. At that point, you burn this instead. Cool ability with a lot of upswing potential. Now, the Gorger with Regular Club is your go-to Gorger. He is your cheapest. This guy is your all-around workhorse. 3536 is excellent and is more than capable of cracking skulls of just about anyone. He has no unique ability. He is just a solid bloke who does damage reliably. For 175 points, he is a total steal. There's nothing more to say about him really. He's just a really good model. And then you have regular Gorgers too. These guys are also great. They are 5 points more expensive than the Club Gorger, and they are statistically about the same against most things. They are noticeably better against toughness 3 and a little bit better against toughness 6, but then slightly worse against everything in between. Ultimately, you can go with either the Gorger or the Club Gorger, and you'll perform about the same either way. It's a very small difference overall. If you want to be safe, just run one of each. If you want more points for blessings, you take the club. You are honestly fine either way. The stats are so damn close, it's practically negligible. I personally like running the club, but I've had great success running regular Gorgers. And honestly, running regular Gorgers and rolling lots of dice is just fun. So you just do you in that case. And can you believe that's all there is to it? The Mawpack is tiny and they are all great in their own way. Allies can be brought in, and we will look at those in a second. But if you are looking for an effective warband that just works right out the box, this is that warband. Everything here is at the very least good, and most of it is downright excellent. So let's take a step back and look at those allies, okay? And honestly, there's only two that really stand out as obvious potential inclusions if you want to run a kind of funky warband. And there's a third one that does kind of work that we will look at separately in our lists. But starting off, we have the big boy himself. We have the Brute Boss. The Brute Boss is amazing. This guy is stupidly good and a must-take in almost every single Destruction warband. Why? Because he's only 190 points. He's outstanding defensively. He hits harder than most Gorgers. He still has access to charge, albeit a slower version of it. And he fixes one of the biggest issues that the Gorgers face: objective missions. The Brute Boss has access to you messing, and this means you can make it so enemies with less than 15 wounds can't hold objectives, basically, in a roundabout way. This means your Brute Boss can walk up to an objective and just claim it. Anyone who tries to stop him will likely die because not many things can stand up to a Brute Boss. They are kind of amazing. Blessings like +1 movement are amazing on this guy, and if you want to get a bit spicy and a bit more aggressive, you put on +1 attack. The Brute Boss is about the price of a Gorger, and you should consider taking one in your lists. He is game changing for these guys. He is the solution to most of your problems. No exaggeration required. The only real downside here is his movement of 3, which makes him a little bit slower. He won't be able to cross the entire board, which means he really will be gunning for the closest objective and trying to take that and lock it down. So he's a bit of a backliner, where your Gorgers are more of a run forward and clobber things kind of deal. And the Brugit is the final addition you should consider before you go and look at our final list later on. Although do bear in mind, you will need to drop a whole Gorger to take him and then take another cheap ally, probably from the Gobapalooza. What you get here is very nice though. +3 attacks on a Gorger is stupid. You absolutely put this on your blessed Great Club and watch as he charges into combat with 6 attacks, dealing 4/8 damage and deletes whatever you need killing. In general, I feel like the Brugit is a little bit win more, but you are elite and you do need dice to work. And this gives you more dice to try and force probability onto your side. The downsides of the Brugit: you do lose a Gorger. You also lose some tempo, since you have to spend an activation to use the Loon Shrine potion, slowing your roll quite a bit. The potion also competes heavily with other abilities. You want those doubles for charge, you want those doubles for onslaught. This puts more strain on your resources. He's a great model, but he does change the flow of the Mawpack's game plan, and I'm not entirely sure if that's for the better. And because these guys are so new, I haven't tested enough to confirm either way. And speaking of new, I have made 3 lists here, and I have tested all 3, but they haven't been tested to the point of absolute certainty. These are pretty swanky, and these should get you started when you first start playing Mawpack. This first list is called Just the Box. This is just the Gorger Mawpack box, and that's it. It works well because the warband is exclusively good models. It's not optimized, but if all you want to do is play Mawpack, this is the cheapest and most straightforward way to do that. Not many boxes in Warcry run as white hot as the Mawpack with just 1 box. it'll work and it will clap cheeks. Now, this is the Wandering Brute Boss list. This is more of a specialized list and it's my go-to at the moment. You take +1 crit on your clawback, and the reason for this is because you had 10 points left over, and it works well in this guy. With his double, you can boost his damage all the way to 4/8, and that's just really nice. You then go with a Great Club with +1 attack, 2 Gorgers with clubs, and a Brute Boss. This can be built with 1 box and an Iron Jaw of your choice that's on a brute size base, basically. Brutes are quite hard to get hold of at the minute, and they do come in boxes of 5, which is really inefficient. So just find a cool looking orc and run that and just proxy it or convert one. In this list, you can play objectives surprisingly well. Your damage is just peak murder, and you just do a lot of work here. You use charge, you get in, you beat things up, and you clear objectives. You move your brute onto a dense objective you don't want to deal with, and you just pop your mess in. And that's it. That is the plan right there in a nutshell. It's super straightforward and really effective. You just need to be careful. If your Gorgers start to die, you will lose momentum very, very quickly. You need to attack at the right time, at the right places, and not get bogged down with multiple guys swinging at your head turn after turn after turn. Now, I've mentioned a few times the third ally you want to consider, and this is going to be mentioned quite a bit now in the Threat All Day Every Day list. This list changes the entire feel of the Mawpack, but it does have some funky stuff to it. You take your +1 crit clawback, a Club Gorger, a Brute Boss, Hrothgorn, Quiv, and Bushwhacker. This is a 6-man warband that has access to a Strength 6, 4/8, 9-inch range crossbow that can fire 3 to 4 times a turn. This is just a pile of threat bubbles that claps cheeks at a range and in close combat. And not only that, Hrothgorn himself has 40 wounds and toughness 4, making him really hard to kill, like borderline impossible to kill unless you go after him and you gun for him with everything you have. You control the entire board here. Your opponent is forced to make decisions, and all of them will likely result in them taking massive damage. Of course, the Brute once again is here for objectives. You use your messin, you lock things down. Not only that, the Brute, Hrothgorn, Quiv, Bushwhacker, and the Clawback can all hold treasure, fixing their innate weakness to this mission type. In fact, this list kind of fixes a lot of things that the Mawpack struggle with. You can drop the Brute Boss if you want and then replace him with any Gorger you want. The Great Club in particular might be fun here, but they all do about the same damage without blessings, so just dip, dabble, and take whatever you want there. This looks to be a pretty damn powerful list, but I would maybe avoid taking this list to a casual event. This is quite a competitively focused list that will not make you many friends if you just take it to your everyday casual game of Warcry. This is very hard to deal with. So overall, the Gorger Mawpack is quite possibly the most powerful bespoke warband in all of Warcry right now. They have clear weaknesses, but those weaknesses can be fixed with clever play or effective use of allies. They have speed, they have action economy, they have great abilities, their stats are outstanding. Games Workshop haven't released a successful elite bespoke before, so the Mawpack being this great is a huge win for players who want something small and something killy on a bespoke without having to go to the compendium. I absolutely love these guys.
Groovy.
And that is the end of the show. Please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, you absolute legends. Do you like the Gorger Mawpack? Did I miss something? Do you have some secret tech that you want to share with the rest of the community? Let me know and let everyone know in the comments down below. But until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, I will catch you in the next video. Ta-ra.